police officer shootings of civilians seems to be an increasingly common occurrence in the United States today. And again, we see across our news feeds that this occurs. The case of Amber Geiger has brought national attention to this, and yet, as I was logging onto Facebook today, my friend had messaged me that yet another one of these cases had occurred. We're going to take a look today and go through this article posted by MSN as far as their news feed on the Corona Costa shooting victims and the family's outrage at the grand jury's decision not to indict the officer. The article goes through and it talks basically about how this officer had apparently had some sort of confrontation, the details of which we are not sure of at this time, with the family and their 18-year-old developmentally disabled son. And after his confrontation, it became physical. The son apparently pushed the officer to the ground, and then he claims that he lost consciousness for a brief period of time, after which he awoke and then began firing on the family. Now, it's important to note during this that the family is and was unarmed at the time, and that they were headed away from the officer after the confrontation, and he fired off 10 rounds, striking all 3 of them. So, again, this is very confrontational sort of information involving the police shooting in the family and innocent people getting hurt. But, again, we don't know what the confrontation was over, we don't have all the facts as of yet, and so we'll read through this article, and I just want you to bear those things in mind as we go through this. So it says that the parents and brother of a 32-year-old developmentally disabled man killed during a confrontation with an off-duty Los Angeles police officer inside the Corona Costa expressed outrage Thursday over a grand jury decision not to indict the lawman and Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestron's decision to defend and finding without pursuant to any criminal charges. Now, we've seen most times, I can't think of any time actually, in which a police officer shooting has not resulted in the dropping of the charges or the dismissal of any sort of case against the officer. We are extremely heartbroken. Russell French and father of Kenneth French told reporters in a news briefing at the Aries Suits in Corona. This is another blow to our family. We have lost faith in the U.S. justice system. His wife, Paula, broke down in tears while speaking, saying the policeman, Salvador Sanchez, clearly saw... It's interesting that they name him in this. Usually they withhold the names of the officers. Clearly saw were unarmed. He was wrong to fire 10 shots at our family. Both parents were struck in the gunfire. Ouch. Paula French remembered her oldest son as extremely caring and kind. It's such a sad end, she said tearfully. We lost him. As a mom, this is the worst case. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. The French attorney Del Gallepo announced during the briefing that he would file a federal civil rights lawsuit against Sanchez, the Los Angeles Police Department, and the city of Los Angeles. However, he said the family had retained a second attorney who specialized in criminal law to push for inquiries by the U.S. Attorney's Office and the California Attorney General's Office, either of which could pursue criminal prosecution of Sanchez in the June 14th shooting. Gallipo said he was not surprised by the lack of an indictment in Heston's decision to forego filing charges. There have been thousands of officer-involved shootings, and not one police officer has been prosecuted. Again, I don't know if that's true. I do think that they have been prosecuted. I just don't know that they have been convicted. If the Attorney General said, or the attorney said, geez, I can't speak today. That's one reason why there are so many shootings. If this had been anyone other than a police officer, that individual would have been arrested and charged in 48 hours. That is the truth. The big problem that I think that people have is not necessarily the fact that officers are involved in these shootings. It's that they're held to a different standard than the average person, you, I, or anyone else on the street. And there's this mentality that has developed amongst the general public, and largely in the police as well, that the police are untouchable, that they can do anything that they want to anyone, and there is no sort of reconciliation or accountability for them to be held to any kind of standard that can protect the public from them. And, you know, he's right in saying that there are thousands of shootings. You can look up on YouTube and you get tens of thousands of results on stuff like this. And, you know, not just shootings, but also lesser crimes as well, that there just seems to be no accountability or any sort of justice in resulting from these interactions with civilians. Kevin French, the descendant's younger brother, said that he spoke to employees with McKinney's. Oh, excuse me, I skipped this part. How was the evidence presented and argued before the jury? Gallipo wondered. He could not understand how someone can fire 10 shots at unarmed people, wounding them in the back, and the jury could not indict on a single charge. And that's really kind of what the question is. It makes me think that there's more to this story if a jury were to find, this officer not guilty. But again, we've seen a lot of cases where the justice system works where the prosecution and the defense are both in collusion with each other. The officer representing the court is also within the jurisdiction and administration of the elected officials, who have influence with a court system that doesn't want to look bad in front of the public. And so they will have a defense system and a prosecution system both working in collaboration to defend the officer. And this is very common. I've had attorneys tell me flat out that this is how it works, that the judge will assign a case and they will talk about it without the victim's family in association to those discussions, and how to present the evidence in order to defend officers. And it's very disgusting to think that, the person who is representing you and trying to get you justice as your prosecutor is at the same time colluding and collaborating with the defense of the person who has committed the crime. And, I don't know if that happened in this case, but it's very hard to think what in the world could have been presented in which it would justify an officer firing 10 shots, shooting 2 people that we know are innocent from the information presented here, in order to hit somebody who is unarmed and walking away from him. Kevin French, the descendant's younger brother, said he spoke to employees at McKinney Street Costco, believed that his siblings had been a victim of cold-blooded murder. My entire family was unarmed, he said. They were moving away from this officer. They had their backs turned. None of them were poised an imminent threat. DA Hestron is giving someone with a badge a permit to shoot without consequences or accountability. Well, the accountability is supposed to be held with the grand jury in presenting that evidence, but the question becomes, how is that evidence presented? And so I think it's very much to the credit of this father in saying that he wanted to know how that information was presented to the grand jury. Heston said Wednesday that he respected the grand jury's determination, emphasizing that we had put our passions and emotions aside and married the facts with the law. We don't pay attention to the family outcries or social media rants. Well, this is a case where your officer shot somebody, with 10 shots, and I understand you're using the grand jury as an excuse not to prosecute him, but there should be some sort of disciplinary action if this is all there is to the story. Even if nothing else, for public relations issues with the community, I would think. But again, we don't have the full stories. We'll wait to see what comes out. According to the DA evidence collected, the shooting was presented to the grand jury beginning in September 9th. They announced Tuesday that no indictment would be handed up. So the grand jury deliberated for this. Wow. Tuesday was several days ago here. So what was that? The 24th? So from the 9th to the 24th, this process took place. So it doesn't seem like it was rushed. Hestron denied Sanchez had been favored with special treatment because he's a cop. This is viewed as an officer-involved shooting, he said. Police officers have to respond to an attack as if they're on duty. Well, I don't think the problem was that he responded to the attack. I think the problem was that he initiated an attack and ended up shooting 3 people. When Russell French first spoke to reporters on August 26th, he said that he had begged Sanchez not to shoot, telling him, "Our son is sick." Gallipo said the parents and son were moving away from the off-duty cop when he opened fire. According to Corona Chief George Johnson, Kenneth French was shot once in the shoulder, 3 times in the back. Paula French was shot in the back, and her husband was shot in the abdomen, resulting in the loss of a kidney. Gallipo said the trio had been shopping for half an hour when they stopped at a food sample booth in the store to nibble on sausages. Why Kenneth French turned physical when Sanchez shoved him to the floor while the off-duty officer held his 18-month-old son is unclear. So it sounds like there was also some defensive priorities involved with the off-duty officer, that he fell to the floor while holding his 18-month-old son. He said the descendant was diagnosed schizophrenic and nonverbal with no history of aggression. According to the attorney, the next opportunity to get... And him being pushed to the floor with his son is in no way justification for what he did as far as firing 10 shots and shooting 3 people. But I understand the desire to defend yourself as a father, but if I had a gun and I had my kid and I was pushed to the floor, my first reaction in no way would be to pull my gun out and start shooting people, particularly when they're walking away. According to the attorney, the next opportunity to get answers is to why there was any contact will be when Sanchez is deposed for the lawsuit, so presumably there'll be more information coming out from this. I will get every bit of information I can, Gallipo vowed. There will be a lot of details released to the public. Heston played a security surveillance videotape from the Costco that partially captured the deadly 7:45 p.m. confrontation. The clips mainly revealed the tail end of the encounter between French and Sanchez, with the former appearing to be the aggressor, and Sanchez falling somewhere out of the frame. Russell French is clearly visible standing in front of his son to turn him back, at which point both men are struck by gunfire and collapse to the floor of the stone. So it sounds like this happened very, very quickly. That he got in this confrontation, pushed him to the floor, the father stepped in, tried to turn him around, and then the guy started firing. So obviously a rather large lack of control on the police officer's part, if that is correct as far as how the situation played. According to the Sanchez attorney David Winslow, the lawman was knocked down and briefly lost consciousness. He lost consciousness and then was able to shoot 3 people. When he awoke, he was found his son next to him screaming. The attorney said his client had no choice but to use deadly force. Well, that's a blatant lie. You always have a choice whether to use deadly force, and I would be more lenient to somebody who was untrained in how to use a firearm and had no training in how to deal with confrontational situations and whatnot. But this is an officer who's supposed to be held to higher standards, who is supposed to have that training to how to handle these situations, and to choose a non-lethal option, and that's why we entrust him with the lethal option. It doesn't seem like he tried any sort of non-lethal option or to pursue anything. He was in no danger of attack, according to this story, as the people were, moving away from him. He decided to go right for deadly force and pulling out his gun and then firing off 10 shots and shooting 3 people. Heston said there was no evidence that Sanchez ever lost consciousness. Okay, there's another problem with the story. The lawman was not hospitalized and his son was not injured. So despite the fact that his son was not injured, he has no evidence to back up the claim of losing consciousness. I wonder if it was in the report, if he gave that statement to the police, if that's where that came from. But if that's the case, then he should have gone to the hospital for a concussion, so that's not really congruent with his story. Sanchez is on paid administrative leave by the LAPD, where he has been a patrolman for 7 years, most recently assigned to the Southwest Division. And that's the story and the details that we have so far. Again, we don't know what caused the confrontation. Maybe the son was attacking someone else and this police officer tried to intervene, and that was the non-lethal option in which he had tried to pursue. Perhaps the guy was, assaulting him and he was right on top of him when the dad was trying to turn him around, and, them saying that he was walking away was like 1 or 2 feet. We don't know because we haven't seen the video. It hasn't been released to my knowledge as of yet. But this will be an interesting story to follow and find out what happens with this officer and with this family. My heart, of course, goes out to these guys, all 3 of whom were shot because of their son's actions and the combination with the police's response to that son's actions. When somebody attacks you, you certainly have your right to defend yourself. I do not know if this state requires a stand or has a stand your ground doctrine, or if it has a duty to retreat doctrine. That is something that should probably be looked into as far as the legality of this, but just the moral principle of something that if somebody pushes you down, you don't respond instantaneously with pulling out your gun and shooting them, particularly in the case if their claim is true that they were walking away. So anyways, we'll follow this up and see where this story goes. It's interesting nonetheless, just because we're just talking about this with Amber Geiger, and now we see, another case starting. We haven't even finished the last one as far as what's caught national attention. And, yeah, I would be surprised if California has a stand your ground clause. But I don't doubt that they have some sort of exception or loophole or some extra additional privilege that off-duty police officers have in order to get them out of hot water situations like this that normal citizens, the rest of us, do not have and does not apply to us. So we'll see where it goes. Thank you, guys.